Thinking about these feelings got me in my feelings, but I'ma be alright. Thinking about these feelings got me in my feelings.
Hey, welcome to the New Jersey Psychological Association's Power of the Spoken Word podcast series. I'm Dr. Daniel Lee, and this is the place and a resource where you can find everything about New Jersey psychology and psychologists. It's for everyone who lives, loves, and works in New Jersey. So today, we have the opportunity to really talk to everyone about the power of being a member of New Jersey Psychological Association. So I want to start off the segment with part of our leadership team. We're going to introduce you to Dr. Lucy Santana Takagi. She's our current president, and to our executive director, Kira Bozel-Smith. And so one of the things that we're looking to do today is really highlight sort of how NJPA, is working in the state of New Jersey, and it can be a resource to you and continues to be a resource to its members. So Dr. Takagi, it's been a pleasure working with you. And if you don't know, I'm the president-elect, so I get to fill her large shoes in a few months. But I want to start with, can you talk about sort of all of the work NJPA and you have been doing related to COVID, and how it's been benefiting every psychologist in the state of New Jersey?
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Lee. I'm ecstatic that you actually are, when you talk about work, this development of this podcast series is actually an example of how, as president-elect and as members of the association, we all come together as one. And we just increase the visibility of the association across the state of New Jersey, and the podcast series is a good example of that. So the question about how NJPA has actually performed in view of COVID, I think one of the strongest arms of the association is advocacy, but advocacy is broad. We advocate for the profession, we advocate for our members, we advocate for the public at large, right? It's part of our mission statement. But in terms of advocacy, we advocate for the welfare of psychologists, the welfare of patients, but we do that most strongly through legislative advocacy. And legislative advocacy is basically one of the strongest arms of NJPA. We do have a government affairs agent who is in Trenton and who basically helps us advocate and push forth our agenda. And just as an example, and I won't be able to, I couldn't memorize all of this, so I'm going to be actually looking at timelines as I'm talking about it. But like with COVID, the state of New Jersey, the government declared a lockdown on March 21st of 2020. Now, March 6th, NJPA started informing membership about how to protect your patients and your practice regarding COVID. So that gives you like a good visual of like when our advocacy started. The state closed on March 21st. On March 6th, we started sending out announcements. And the leadership on March 6th was actually preparing to go to Washington, D.C. We have an annual conference from the American Psychological Association. It's called the Practice Leadership Team Conference. And that conference went from March 9th to March 12th. And we were all between the 9th and the 12th, we were all in Washington. So before we left to Washington, we were already sending multiple updates to our members, how to protect your patients, how to protect your practice. These are important factors that you need to consider as we are foreseeing the advent of COVID.
Yes.
While at APA, there was, because as people were becoming more aware of the impact of COVID, there were a lot of questions about telehealth. There were a lot of questions about Medicare reimbursement. And while we were at APA, we were actually able to communicate to our members and provide them with very clear status of the Medicare law that was then going through Congress and going through the Senate while in Washington. So that was another, I mean, that was a coincidence that
Yes.
we were there, but we were there. And as a result, our members got informed about the Medicare status because, again, Medicare at that time did not have coverage for phone or audio only sessions. There were multiple questions about how treatment can continue to be provided with COVID, especially for the elderly and disabled. So we really were advocating collaboratively with APA, and we were communicating to our members as things were happening. At that time, a law had been proposed. It was still being considered, and eventually, ultimately, a few days later, I believe it was on March 14 or so, we updated our members that the law had been passed, but it needed the signature of the Health and Human Service Secretary. And so that happened shortly after. On March 14, when we were actually back in New Jersey, from the PLC conference, we continue to update our members. And on the 14th, we started developing letters to the Board of Psychological Examiners, to the American Psychological Association, to partner with APA to advocate for Medicare, to continue to advocate for Medicare. And we are still partnering with APA regarding Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement for telehealth under COVID. We also accessed and developed letters with the Department of Banking and Insurance in New Jersey, because state insurance companies needed to basically expand the rules for telehealth also. At that point in time, insurance companies were only covering telehealth for in-network providers, and only if they were using their own platform for telehealth. We, as a result of I can't take the only credit for this, but I do want to believe that our advocacy was influential in the governor, because ultimately the governor announced, and I'm not sure when exactly that happened, but I believe it was on March 22nd, maybe. That's when the governor announced departmental actions to expand access to telehealth. And much of what we had advocated through letters were actually included in his departmental actions. So again, our advocacy began from March 6th. The governor issued the new law on the 22nd. All of those weeks, then those days and those times, and all the letters that we crafted and wrote and repetitively asking for expansion seem to have been incorporated under the governor's orders. So that is an example of legislative advocacy, like on the go. COVID impacted everyone negatively, obviously, but in some ways, I think we had all hands on deck. We were ready to actually do what we needed to do to educate ourselves and educate the members about what was clear and what was unclear, and the answers that we had and the answers that we didn't have, because there were many things that were happening, and still like that, there are many issues that are not yet resolved. Things are not clear forever. Currently, we're partnering with APA, asking for a continuation of the expansion on telehealth for an additional 12 months, and or until a vaccine is deemed appropriate and effective in New Jersey. So we continue our partnerships. We continue to advocate for legislatively to the needs of our members and to the need of all psychologists. So whether you're a member of NJPA or whether you're a psychologist practicing, you still are benefiting, because these are state orders, right? Or federal orders. So we are all benefiting from that kind of advocacy that the association provides.
And I would like to highlight too that, Lucy's really being humble. She has taken the leadership in terms of the association and being attentive and responsive and proactive. Particularly in advocating for telehealth and to secure our ability to be reimbursed in a lot of different ways. So part of that was being able to do phone consults to deal with equity issues. Not everybody had access to, laptops or smartphones or computers. And I would also want to highlight that part of this work, and I think Lucy mentioned it again, was it does benefit everyone. That, you know, whether, and we really need the support of individuals to sort of get us to the place that we can continue to do that level of work. Because as she mentioned, we're still working, you know, so
Exactly.
COVID and responding to telehealth is one issue, but there are other concerns. There are other issues that NJPA are, you know, really focusing on. And I mean,
And
you know, right now it's the school, you know, youth-based mental health programs, that advocacy work. So, you
right.
know, I think people need to
And
know.
and to add to that, we were doing all this advocacy for COVID while keeping the financial concerns of the organization and the financial health of the organization consistently on check. We were
Yes.
doing all of this advocacy while continuing to meet the needs of our legislative priorities. So the licensing law, we were
Yes.
testifying for the licensing law at the
Yes.
same time that we were also advocating for COVID, right? And in the licensing law, we are it's a legislative priority for NJPA, and that is you know. I'm gonna blank on. I'm blanking on the word. That basically is asking for the ability for the postdoctoral year to be accepted if all that work has been done pre-doctorally. So
Yes.
basically, it speeds up the licensing process without taking any requirement away.
Yes.
And that advocacy continued alongside the COVID advocacy. Currently, we are proposing to the NJPA Executive Board, you know, to have SIPACT, you know, the interjurisdictional license to facilitate, you know, psychologists who practice in one state to be able to practice on another state if they join SIPACT, to have that legislative piece, because there are two laws regarding SIPACT in Trenton. We are asking the executive board to vote on making that a priority for the organization too, which is going to hopefully benefit all psychologists,
Yes.
especially in view of COVID and in view of the
Yes.
limitations for telehealth. So
Yes.
we are working, but we need membership is the biggest piece of our health, of our financial health, and it's also the biggest piece of how we determine what needs to be a priority and what we
Yes.
need to advocate for. It's really from the feedback of members and from the involvement of members in the organization that we become aware of what is important to membership at large as well as to the public. So that is a key piece. And despite all the financial impact that has been negative as a result of COVID, you know, we want to highlight like what we do for membership, but also to invite the consideration of the importance of belonging to an association,
Yes.
because that is actually how you get your voice heard. That's
Yes.
how you actually have you can have the ability to sit at the table that makes decisions, and you can have
Yes.
the ability to actually have power within the
Yes.
state to
Yes.
actually get changes to happen.
And you know, and I really appreciate all of that information, Lucy, about advocacy, because when we were at a hearing, I think one of the politicians asked, well, how many psychologists are in the state of New
Right.
Jersey? I think we were like 3,600, we found out. And then, and this is where I'm going to shift to Kara to kind of talk about some of the other sort of resources we provide, because then what we also realize is that we need the numbers to be unified. So as we grow as an association, the more we can say we represent the complete or total or almost all the voices of New Jersey psychologists, the more influence and sort of power that we can have. So I want to shift to our executive director for a few moments and see, Kara, you talk about all of the resources. So we heard advocacy is one, but you also mentioned a model about it's the 4 pillars that really offer a lot of broad support, not just to psychologists, but to the community. So can you kind of let us know what are those 4 pillars and talk a little bit about how are they a resource for psychologists in the community at large?
Thank you very much for having me this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. So what I will do, I'm happy to talk about the pillars, and the pillars are the way in which the association gets the work done. So first, big picture, NJPA is a not-for-profit 501c6, and the purpose of our organization is to promote, protect, and enhance the business and science of psychology and psychologists who serve the public. And we're a member, volunteer-driven statewide association. So we have a small central office staff and some consultants, but the work and the manpower is really in psychologists in training, and those who are passionate about the profession and the science. And we work closely at the national level with American Psychological Association. The benefit of NJPA as an association is that I get to speak to, just did yesterday, to the executive directors of all the state psychological associations. We have 8 county affiliates, so we're connected not only at the national level, state level, and county level with psychologists. We also have various collaborations with outside groups to enhance our mission and to follow our strategic plan. So with that umbrella view of who we are and what we do, I do, as you mentioned, operate under 4 pillars. That's how I manage the work, and that's how the work of NJPA gets done. And they are membership, advocacy, communication, and continuing education. So membership, as you mentioned, we talked about how many psychologists are in the state, but we have about 1,600 members. And these are members of diverse career stage, age, background, beliefs, practice area, work settings. And again, we are always welcoming new members, and are about to start our 2021 dues campaign. And there are so many opportunities. The difference, Lucy was talking about advocacy and how it does impact every psychologist in the state. But what you miss out if you're not a member of NJPA is a seat at the table for all of the things that I'm going to mention. So you can roll up your sleeves and actually participate in the process if you are a member. So as far as membership, we have that many members. They're diverse, and there's opportunities, endless opportunities for peer-to-peer working, rolling up your sleeves on our committees and networking and professional building. And so that's all, we always think of representing this membership as a whole, which can be challenging because there are many populations. So whatever your niche interest is or who you like to interact with, there's somebody here for you. There's a group here for you to get the work done. And as Lucy mentioned, a lot of our work is advocacy work, not only in Trenton at the state level. I'm constantly speaking with the Board of Psychological Examiners executive director. So we have regulatory efforts that we, are constantly have our fingers and close contact with them. And then again, we go to Washington, D.C. every year. Yesterday, I had 2 meetings with APA, one with their political action committee to talk about upcoming events with federal legislators and what's going on at the national level. And then I had a meeting with all the executive directors, the state level. So that's advocacy. Communication, the benefit for our members is that we have you see the front end of our website, which is available for members, for the public to interact with finding a psychologist, some resources, and some general information. There's a backside to the website that only members can see, where we have practice resources. We shoot out every week a Friday update that communicates the hot topics of the association, but also what's going on at the state and national levels. We have the ability for our members to communicate with the Director of Professional Affairs and the Ethics Committee for consultations. We produce a journal that our members receive and can write articles on. We have these podcasts that we're working on, and we also produce an e-newsletter for the public that's shared with the general membership, but also legislators. Again, I have the opportunity to communicate with the Board of Psychological Examiners and other outside groups and our government affairs agents. So what you don't see if you're not a member is what's going on, behind the member wall on our website. But that's a wonderful resource that we provide. Continuing education. We were very active in articulating to our members when mandatory continuing education came into play in New Jersey. We were right there with the Board of Psychological Examiners and legislators working when it became law, and then the regulatory building, we were there. We shared all of this with our members, letting them know what's coming. We are continuing. We have a bill right now that has to do with continuing education, and we're setting up a time right now for our members to meet with legislators to talk about that. So we are, the benefit, again, of being a member, however, continuing education impacts everybody. You have the ability to be a part of the process if you're behind the membership of NJPA. And so we try to have a robust continuing education program, trying to get so psychologists can satisfy their 40 every licensing period, including domestic violence and opioid. And the opportunities for our members is to network with others when they get there. What do you want to hear? You know, do you want to help find a speaker? Does somebody interest you? We have both live and home study opportunities for our members and non-members, but the members get a discounted rate. So we like to, you know, provide that for our members. We have students that participate in our programming and volunteer and help and get these continuing education programs for free. And another thing we do, not only we're trying to impact the continuing education mandatory needs of psychologists, but we also collaborate with outside groups to provide continuing education to focus on visibility of psychology and psychologists within the state. We have a maternal health program coming up. We have guest speaker legislators that are there. We've been talking with the First Lady of New Jersey, and she's aware of this program. It's very important to her. So if there's a dual role of providing education, but also to make sure that psychology and psychologists is at the forefront. And people think of our association when a topic comes up, you know, oh, I'm going to ask NJPA what they think. Maybe they can help. Right. So so that's that's the way we manage the work within the association. And I hope that answered your question.
That was great. And just I'm glad you mentioned our maternal mental health program, which is September 25th. And I want to highlight to folks that is a huge discount. I believe it's about 3.5 credits for only $40. So if you're thinking about just even testing and experience and how our CE opportunities look like or feel like, and sort of the learning opportunity, that's about the most advantageous way to experience NJPA at a reasonable, that's beyond reasonable. That's a great price for the number of credits. And so what I wanted to do, because we're getting ready to transition and kind of let everyone meet different people who experience NJPA, but I do want to give Dr. Takagi another opportunity to sort of give any closing thoughts and do the same thing for Kira, and then we'll move on to our next group.
Thank you. Well, you know, I just wanted to add that one of the pillars that Kira indicated is communication, and the communication doesn't only occur between the leadership and the members, but it also occurs outside of the association. So this idea of making NJPA visible, that entailed a lot of collaborations with outside groups that we are actually engaged in. Also a significant focus on marginalized groups. In every letter that we wrote this year, we integrated guilt issues and social advocacy issues, asking the governor and legislators to attend to the impact of policies and legislations on members of the marginalized groups, especially as a result of COVID. We had a conference in March on immigration and the negative impact of immigration, the trauma impact of immigration on undocumented immigrants. That was back in February. We have a collaboration with the 2 other psychological associations in New Jersey. We formed a coalition, an intermental health and psychological association coalition, IMPACT, where every year we establish a conference. So that type of communication, there's a lot of vibrancy in the association, not only in terms of career stage, but also in terms of diversity, in terms of, you know, in integrating the important issues of our practice and our profession on, you know, in helping members actually having resources, as many resources as they can, in order to push forth our mission and our strategic plan.
And one last thing, Daniel, I just wanted to also note that our fall conference is coming up in October on integrated care. So that's another way that NJPA is trying to stay on top of what's going on across the nation in integrated care. So that would be my last thing I wanted to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate all the plugs because people need to know we do offer a lot of opportunities to learn, connect, and grow. So I want to say thank you, Dr. Takagi. Thank you, Kira, for your time. We're going to bring in our next round of guests to give everybody a flavor of who NJPA is. So we have already one, Dr. Morgan Murray, who's our past president. And we also have Dr. Abizola Gallagher. And we're going to have everybody sort of introduce themselves. So we're going to have this conversation a couple of different ways. I want to welcome everybody and thank you for your time. So I want to start off with Dr. Morgan Murray, because he's our current past president. And one of the initiatives that he has brought to NJPA is really the idea of how we integrate social justice issues and guilt issues. So I want to see if you can inform sort of the audience, like can you describe some of the ways that's happening, like in the past and even in real time?
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks, Daniel. I appreciate being here, and sorry for some of my technical difficulties. But
no worries.
Yes, but to address the issue of integrating guild and social advocacy, I think we can go to our mission statement, and I think that's really what a main driving force was to listen to our mission statement, because we're supporting psychology as a profession and as a science, but also, and very importantly, as a means of promoting the health and welfare and the diversity of the people of New Jersey and the diversity of our membership. So it's not just a nice idea; it's really at the core of what we do as an association, and the ability to get out what we're about. What is psychology about, and how does psychological knowledge and scholarship contribute to the well-being of the citizens and the residents of New Jersey? And we've been working on this for a while. We developed a social advocacy policy back in 2017 to identify that statements that were scientifically based, that psychologists spoke with knowledge and expertise, and that helped us remain relevant in the state and in the issues of mental health. I'll go quickly here because I know the time is precious, but I really believe that with our mission statement, with our strategic plan, which was to infuse and address diversity and inclusion issues in all areas of the association, with our social advocacy policy, the NJP Executive Board needed to make statements to the public around these issues to keep us relevant to the public, but also to inform the public about our science and scholarship and how it contributed, how it pushed these issues forward. But we didn't only make statements. There were ways that we put it into action. And one of those ways was our Immigration Emergency Action Group. This was a group that was trying to collaborate with other associations to deal with the terrible problem when immigrant children were being separated from their parents. And that was a problem in New Jersey. I think people think about sort of the border states, where that was, horrible, but it was happening in New Jersey, and there were kids in detention right in New Jersey. So we collaborated for the New Jersey Association of Infant Mental Health to promote their well-being and to bring our knowledge of early childhood trauma, our knowledge of childhood development, our knowledge of testing and therapeutic interventions. That's a way we can demonstrate our relevancy and our expertise. We impact, which I think was mentioned earlier, but just to impact is the intermental health Psychological and Association Coalition, and we have we did a first project where we had a program, Shine the Light on Multicultural Awareness. That was in April of 2019. Last year, I think Lucy mentioned the One Scar Too Many, addressing the mental health needs of undocumented immigrants in the face of trauma. Luz Maria Garcini was our keynote on that. And then coming up, we have a program that we're putting together now, is the Black Identity Development on December 2nd. And again, what does our psychological knowledge say about this? How can we be relevant to those marginalized groups? How can we make sure there is access to mental health? Part of it is putting it out there. And I'll just mention another collaborative project that we have going on with the Rachel Coalition.
Yes.
Is a victims advocacy group through the Jewish Family Service of New Jersey. We are developing guidelines for the Superior Court of New Jersey when instituting domestic violence therapeutic supervised visitation. We think that's very important. There's a very complex issue when you have kids getting together with an abusive parent, and the qualifications required for someone who would facilitate that kind of therapeutic supervised visitation. And I think that our members of that group are Nicole Raffanello, Eileen Calhudas, Carla Cook, Hanson Thorpe, Cynthia Lishix, Charlena Sears, and Sharon Ryan Montgomery. So we have a lot of expertise on that task force. And I think that's what it's all about, that we are out there, we are working, and people don't always know what psychologists bring. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that's great. And I'm glad that you really highlighted that it's not just about statements, which is a very active role, but it's also about how we can impact policy, how we can help deliver services and really link and increase our visibility in areas where people may or may not sort of connect psychologists to, but also use our position and platform to highlight and elevate issues that we need the community to pay attention to, because it does impact a lot of populations that may or may not have the voice to be heard. So I really appreciate that work. And I want to shift a little bit because we have Dr. Abizela Gallagher. And one of the things that I love talking to members and people who are part of the NJPA community is about how we are a resource to a lot of different people. I think Morgan did a great job in talking about like infant, sort of mental health. We talked about immigration. We talked about even sort of the judicial and court system. So can you tell us a little bit about where you're at in terms of your career with psychology and how are you impacting folks in your area?
Well, I'm a senior psychologist at this point, close to retirement, but I will continue my membership in NJPA because I feel I get so much out of it. And let me begin by saying how much I appreciate the work that the executive board and the central office staff are doing. I was amazed at how quickly you were providing information on a steady basis about related to the pandemic. It really was so helpful to me as a clinician, and I know to others. I was just awed by that. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you, because I couldn't imagine the amount of work that you put into that. And so I think that was a great benefit for me as a member. So I also want to say as to what I get out of NJPA, which I think is a lot. One is I appreciate the fact that I can say that I feel informed and I'm supported in being informed by what's going on in not only the profession, but what's going on in the state of New Jersey. Yes. Legislatively and otherwise, the work that you do with APA and other mental health associations is really very helpful. And I am particularly fond of the Friday update because you put a lot of things in there that I find helpful, including information about workshops and activities from other state county associations. And I actually go use that as a way of finding information about what's out there as far as workshops. And I have been attending workshops not only with NJPA, but county associations that I'm not even a part of.
That's really good.
But what I also get out of it, I think, is that I'm active on a number of committees, and people think, okay, you're on a committee, it's a lot of work. But what people forget to consider is that you also learn a lot.
Yes.
I've learned so much. I put a lot of work, but I've learned so much from those committees. And one of the earliest committees that I was on, HIV AIDS committee. I don't, people may not remember that was back in the 90s, but I've also served 6 years on the ethics committee years ago. And moving forward, that still serves me as well. Currently, I have been on CODI, which is a committee that advises the executive board on the issues of diversity and inclusion. So I feel like I'm really making a difference in that way, and raising the consciousness of our organization as it relates to those issues. Also, it provides us as members the opportunity to to publish. I think the journal is amazing, and I've also contributed to the journal. So if people want to publish, that's a great way to start. Another thing and I'm also, I forgot, I also mentioned I'm on COSIA, the Council of Continuing Education. That has been an awesome experience that I have tremendously enjoyed, and I was also a part of the Social Justice Task Force. One other area that I want to mention is that of networking. And that is, I have, when you're a part of the association, you get to meet people that you probably wouldn't meet otherwise. And over the course of my experience at NJPA, I've got to know a lot of people, and some of those people have become very close and dear friends.
That's really good.
For me, I have really gotten a lot out of the association, and I think there's a great advantage in being a part of it, and not only to learn and grow, but to make a difference within the profession and within our state.
Thank you. I mean, I know it was a nice tribute. So if that isn't enough to wrangle somebody to join or participate or donate to the foundation, I don't know what is. So I appreciate that. So I know we're getting ready to transition to our next group, but I do want to give everybody an opportunity to share any closing thoughts. So I'm going to start with our current past president, Morgan. Do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to share?
Well, the one thing I would say is that it's been gratifying that some people have renewed their membership just to be involved in some of these causes and to contribute. And I would just encourage people. There's a lot going on, and we're doing stuff and practical things in the community. And so join us. There's a lot of work to do. I agree.
I want to add something else. One of the things that you had asked us to speak to was the myth.
Yes.
Buster and addressing that. One of the myths that I think that is out there is that it's not relevant to people of color. NJPA, that it just don't bother. I don't believe that. In fact, I see growing numbers of people of color. We're still not a lot of us, but there's a growing number, and we're taking on leadership positions. We're on committees. We're making a difference. For me, when I was in my doctoral program, a well-known and respected Black psychologist in the state encouraged me to continue my membership in the Association of Black Psychologists, state and national, which I did. It was wonderful. But interestingly enough, what a lot of people don't know, he also encouraged me to join NJPA.
Yes.
Because I respect him and he gives such good advice. I joined in the late 80s, and I'm still here.
Wow.
Because he said that there's a value in being a part of both. It's not for me a matter of do I join ABSI, the New Jersey chapter, or do I join NJPA? I think there's great value in being a part of both.
Yes.
And that's what I would encourage people to continue. And I think it's also important for people of color to be a part of here, because when you have people of color in the organization, when you come to our meetings, when you join when you see the leadership, it says that there's someone there like you. Maybe there's a place for me here to learn, to grow, to make a difference. And I believe that. So I would say it's not a choice of either or, but both.
Yes. And I love your point, because, I mentioned earlier that even about leadership, that one of my roles is president-elect. So it really shows you that we are really focused on, even as an association, of creating opportunities for individual colors, to be in leadership. But what that also means is we get to start shaping and thinking about the way we're engaging all the communities. And we do have impact, which is our partnership with the Latino Mental Health Association and the New Jersey chapter of the Association of Black Psychology. And that's even deepening those relationships and experiences.
And it's important.
And so I'm glad you brought that up, and thank you for busting that myth, because I think we need to keep naming them. So I really appreciate your time and energy and everything you contributed today and continue to contribute to the organization. And I definitely want to acknowledge and honor that to both of you guys. So have a good day, and we're going to bring in our next round of guests anytime. Have a good day. Hey, how's everybody doing? I think we are here, and I wanted to bring up our next round of guests, and these are some of my favorite people. So we have Dr. Janet Burson. These are my South Jersey crowd. We actually outnumber the North Jersey folks today. We have Dr. Susan McGarty. She's our Director of Professional Affairs, and we have the chair of our membership committee, Dr. Eileen Torres. So welcome, everyone. So what we're talking about today is really to give everybody an opportunity and a sense of who we are and what we're doing. So, and really thinking about it from a lot of different perspectives. So I'll start with Janet real quick and say, can you talk to us about sort of how NJPA has sort of been a resource to you, and how can it be a resource to folks who are similar to you?
Okay. Hi. I'm in private practice in the southern part of the state and Morristown. One of the important things for us, NJPA, is providing the broader state view. Most of my practice has been solo practice and also forensics, so that there are areas that I need to learn more about, and then I sometimes do, from programs, from discussions, from connections with colleagues. Now I'm planning for retirement, which COVID has kind of interfered with, and it's clear that the kind of problems and concerns that come up about retirement, we're all dealing with. And so it's been terrific to know that there are some programs about it, that we can talk to colleagues. It's a source of connection and colleagueship. There are resources, like being able to talk to Susan, who's the DPA. If there are questions for years, that the person in that position has been incredibly important. The members know that they can call and ask a question. It will be researched if necessary, and it's very helpful. What people were talking about before in terms of the laws and the legal input, I think is really important, not just for our letting them know what we think, but also for finding out what the laws are. That had to do with CE. It has to do most recently with the teletherapy stuff, and that's been incredibly important. I think seminars, conferences, just conversations, you meet a lot of people. I've been active in several committees. Bisala and I were on the ethics committee together for 6 years. And this is an isolating profession. So that part has been terrific. In terms of myths, the one I came up with is the idea that NJPA will always be there and runs on its own and will help take care of us, the masses. I don't think that people really appreciate how important volunteering is, being part of it, so you can have a say and also so you can know what's going on. I think with CEs, that was especially true. I think with the COVID stuff, it's been incredible. And I also think that what the organization has done is wonderful, and what Susan has done has been terrific. Well, yeah. In terms of getting us information about what insurance companies are doing. For each of us to do that on our own could make you crazy. So I'm really glad we have NJPA, and since we're so far away, those of us in the South.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder sometimes to be part of it, especially before it was all virtual.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important, and I think members don't always appreciate what they're getting from the organization.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I love the idea of, being conscious of not taking it, the situation for granted. And I think you've been talking about Susan so much. We're going to shift to her because I know she's on a tight timeline. She's doing her best. But I think that also demonstrates how, it's a resource and it's a precious commodity. So, Dr. McGrody, if you want to talk to us about sort of what you do, how that's a resource and a benefit, and we'll gladly let you go. Oh, you're muted. You're still muted. Susan, I don't know if you hear me. You're muted. You're still muted. You're muted. Uh-huh.
You have to unmute yourself.
So this is the space of a virtual world. So, and I love the flexibility because she's literally taking time before an appointment. So, are you with us?
No, she's still muted. Okay.
Gotcha.
I'm really sorry for the technical difficulties. I do have an appointment that came up yesterday that I waited a long time for. So I'm obviously in my car, but I wanted to just comment on listening to our team talk this morning and how inspiring that's been to hear the diversity of perspectives, the diversity of ideas, and how even though we are all very diverse people coming from very diverse backgrounds, as a community, as a leadership community, we have really come together and overcome our differences to really do something very amazing throughout this pandemic. And I think that that's a microcosm of what NJPA is becoming. That, we're NJPA strong. We're a team. And as Dr. Burson said, practice is very isolating. And now it's not just isolating, it can be exhausting. And knowing that you have a team behind you, that you're not in it alone, even if you're not using the team at that moment, you didn't have a chance to check the Friday update or go on the listserv, you know that you're not in this alone, and that if you get a PSYOP audit, or if you have a patient that is doing something that you're really unclear and think is ethically murky, that there's always someone who has your back. And I think that is an invaluable resource for clinicians and psychologists to know that, like, I'm not in this alone, because I've been in private practice. I still do some clinical practice, and it can be very draining to feel that you're out there. As a DPA, I started in March, and it's just been an amazing opportunity. I've had the chance to talk to many of you. I wanted to say that I know many of you have benefited from the telehealth insurance chart. Just my latest update, I know a lot of things are changing the end of September. That takes enormous work and checking. But I should have that ready to go by Sunday, or out, so I'll have it out on Monday. Just as a DPA, I'm here as a resource to you. You don't even have to wait till you have like a serious question. Like, if you just want to run something by me, sometimes, when you get in your own head, you can get confused, or you go on social media and you're a cacophony of like different opinions and recommendations. Sometimes it's nice to have the opportunity to just chat with an expert and think things through, because I believe most of us have the truth within us. We know the answer. We just need the opportunity to talk it out with someone and get to that truth within ourselves. So, social opportunities, social justice opportunities, racial justice, advocacy, reasonably priced CE, DPA. I mean, together, we really are NJPA strong. Thank you.
Thank you. And Susan, we appreciate you. And if that doesn't say anything about our team, the fact that she sacrificed, took time to be on this call, transition to get to her doctor's appointment, and I promised to let her go before 9 o'clock. So I appreciate everything. But I do like the idea, like she said, we're invested at a lot of levels. And I appreciate even her demonstrating that, just joining the situation and the podcast and just being able to be available. But we finally have one of our more important sort of members of the board, Dr. Torres.
Oh, I feel so special.
Listen, I said part of this podcast was your idea. We were talking about how can we engage people in a different way. People are overloaded with emails.
Yes.
We're not reading as much, it's just a different world. And we wanted to figure out a way, how can we introduce ourselves, and really reintroduce ourselves to the membership, but also to introduce ourselves to people who don't know us. And I think that was even your concept around what are the myths of NJPA? Like, what do we need to do to really dispel the concerns that might stop somebody or cause somebody to be hesitant about joining? So I wanted to see if you want to sort of close us out with some thoughts about that and any other sort of ideas you want to communicate to the audience.
Sure. I mean, I definitely joined NJPA late in my career I'm not that old, but I'm mid-career, right? So I had been a member of the Latino Mental Health Association. I'm a past president. I've been very involved because I thought that NJPA wasn't going to be very interested in my niche. I work with a largely Latinx population, and I do lots of immigration forensic evaluations and child and family evaluations in my private practice. But earlier in my career, I worked in a hospital, and then I worked as an internship director. And now I'm a professor, and I felt that NJPA was only for private practitioners. So it really wasn't a place for me. And I think we talked about diversity in terms of ethnicity, but I also thought that NJPA didn't have enough of a diversity in terms of psychologist roles. And now that I've been kind of pulled into this great work, being part of the Immigration Emergency Action Group showed me that, there was room for my niche, right? Yes. I got to meet last year with Congressman Pallone in New Brunswick with some pediatricians and lawyers and religious groups. And, finally psychologists had a voice. We actually started a collaboration with Kids in Need of Defense. So we've provided some training on psychological issues to lawyers who are going to be providing defense for children in New Jersey who may be separated from their families. So a lot has been going on. And for me, being a member of the Immigrant Emergency Action Group and the Committee on Diversity and Inclusion has been immensely enjoyable. But I'm proudest of what Lucy and Morgan already mentioned was this Inter-Mental Health and Psychological Association Coalition. I think that it got us all talking in really profound, deep ways. And I appreciate that very much. In terms of what I get out of this, I get to meet with wonderful people. I'm very interested in the membership. I get, as Abisala mentioned, I stay informed, right? I'm learning quite a bit. I have colleagues when I'm too busy to know to refer people to, because I think it's important to have that. I keep learning, and this is what's keeping me in here. I love being part of the advocacy and the networking. The continuing education here has been wonderful. I thought it wasn't going to have some of my interests, and being involved in some of the continuing education is making sure that I get some of those needs met as well. But something that hasn't been mentioned, as a professor at William Patterson, the support from my students has been immense. They are learning quite a bit. They've attended the Cody workshops kind of after the conference. They're presenting their posters, and they're getting a kick out of meeting local psychologists. I even had a student that got a dissertation award through the NJPA Foundation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I do think, and one of my students got a research award for her poster, a different one.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so I do think that wasn't a piece I was aware of. And, having been an internship director before, I wish I got started earlier so that my students would have had these opportunities.
And I really appreciate that. And I think, and I'm glad you brought up the idea that NJPA through the NJPA Foundation is a resource for students. And I will say they, even with COVID, they still were generous. And the foundation just doesn't support students, they also support organizations that work with underserved populations. So to make sure that trainees can be brought in and funded to ensure that more groups of people get mental health support and coverage. So I think there's a lot of ways to engage NJPA in terms of you could donate to the foundation, you could participate in our CEs, and those are all the things you can do without being a member of the association. You can donate to our political action campaign, our PAC, to help with advocacy and legislation changes. And finally, you can be not just a member. We just don't want to check and say join and you just sort of participate on the listserv, get the updates. We want you, I think Janet really said it the best, we need people to volunteer. And not just with us, we need people to volunteer at our affiliates too. There's 8 affiliates who are looking. So you just don't have to worry about being connected at the state level. You could be working at your county level. And we really want to build and strengthen that connection because we want to develop leadership and at both levels, at the county level to get you engaged, because things are happening everywhere. And there's a lot of opportunities and I love the point about addressing isolation. And now that we're in this pandemic, that's even more prominent. So we have to find different ways and spaces to connect professionally so we can be a resource to each other. But more importantly, we can deal with issues around compassion fatigue. We can deal with issues, around burnout. We can deal with issues around stress. And a lot of those issues can be addressed just in community. So whether it's virtual, one day we'll be back to in-person, but until then, I would challenge every person, whether you're a member or a non-member, really use the NJPA community as an opportunity to sort of strengthen who you are, strengthen your practice, and even strengthen the impact that you can have just in the field. So I want to thank all of our guests. I really appreciate your time and energy. I really appreciate people addressing some of the myths that will sort of make some people hesitant and really speaking some truth so people can see that we are a vibrant organization and that we can be a resource to everyone. So we're going to say goodbye and we hope to see you in some form or fashion, and checks do work. So if you just want to donate, I think the campaign for the foundation is donate a therapy hour. So if you don't want to do anything, just donate a therapy hour to the foundation, and trust me, we'll appreciate that too. So everybody have a good day, and we'll see you the next time.
Disclaimer. This podcast is intended to provide members of the general public with access to information regarding the potential benefits of psychological treatment. This podcast is not intended as a referral service, an advertisement of services, or a solicitation of business, and is not intended to create a psychologist-patient relationship between any of the podcast participants and the listener. Any individual status as a participant on this podcast does not suggest recommendation of any such individual as a provider of services by NJPA or its affiliates. Thank you for listening to the NJPA Power of the Spoken Word podcast series. Remember that psychologists can provide meaningful insights to improve our understanding of things that matter in life. As experts in human emotions, behavior, and functioning, psychologists work with you to bring you the positive changes you want in your life. Be sure to visit the NJPA website at www.psychologynj.org and follow NJPA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Thinking about these feelings got me in my feelings, but I'ma be alright.